College Football Nerds. We are talking USC. We are talking Michigan. We are here to discuss one of the two biggest games of the week. We did a preview on Tennessee and Oklahoma, and this one has a lot of similar lines, similar talking points that we're going to get into. Josh is here with me. We're going to get nerdy with y'all. Thanks so much for showing up for this one. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. We don't see USC faces. We haven't seen them as much in the last couple of years, but they're here and they are in our top 10. So I just want to put that out there. Josh, to me, like, there's a lot of discussion this year up to this point about teams that are really highly ranked that haven't played anybody. Tennessee is one of those. Ole Miss is another one of those. USC is a team that has played a roster, and people want to downplay that game because LSU isn't that great this year. And I don't, we said in the summer, LSU's not going to be very good this year. They're a little bit overranked, but they are still a roster. They are still a team that recruits well, that has a seasoned coaching staff, that has a really good quarterback in Nussmeier, in my opinion. So I don't like when people just want to completely discard that and throw them in with a schedule like Ohio State to this point or like Ole Miss to this point. Michigan has also played a roster, but they've played another tier up in Texas, and it didn't go well. However, for Michigan, under a new coach with so much personnel turnover, and USC's got some of that too, you'd want to see that game in Week 10 and not in Week 2. And that leads us to a discussion about asymmetric buys. And you talked about this a little bit before we started rolling, so I'm going to let you run with it. But how interesting is it that it's possible in this case that Michigan not having a bye was good for them, while USC having a bye was good for them? Because usually you see them both have a bye before one another.
I usually hate asymmetric buys. Most of the time these days we tend to see teams get a bye the week prior. Some conferences set rules. The famous example was 2010 Alabama faced 6 teams coming off a bye week in the same year. And after that, the SEC passed a bunch of regulations on how many byes the team would be allowed to face in a given schedule. And they really tried to enforce the idea that if one team was on a bye, the other team would be on a bye as well. Normally, I think it gives too much advantage to one team or another. And you almost never see it with major teams in a major conference having it. Here, though, I think it's kind of an interesting situation because Michigan's coming off an Arkansas State game where Warren threw 3 interceptions. One of them, not his fault, in my opinion, the one where he gets his elbow hit. But the first and the third interception, both of them were just bad throws, throwing off his back foot under pressure. The first time, the third one, not stepping into his throw properly and just sailing one over the middle, which is a complete no-no. You'd rather have that happen against Arkansas State, right? If you're going to have 3 interceptions in 2.5 quarters, you don't want to happen against USC. You're probably going to get 12 possessions in this game when you've thrown a quarter of them away. It's almost a guaranteed loss. So I think in many ways it was a good thing for Michigan. I think they learned a lot about the team. They really discovered Mullings, I think, is a running back probably more effective in the offense right now for whatever reason. Daniel, I'll let you talk on that than Dylan Edwards. And so I think there were a lot of positives, even though I think losing Loveland is a huge blow because I think he was the most dangerous weapon in the passing game. While at the same time, USC seems to have their pieces together. They get time to rest. They get time to practice. I don't think they needed to figure anything out. And so that extra time to prep is just good for them. So it's a weird situation, and I think Michigan probably was better off for having played a game and USC better off for having not.
One of the things interesting to me, we don't get into point spread discussions before we pick our scores, but I want to do it here just because it's interesting in that, kind of like the Tennessee-Oklahoma game, the feeling is that USC is going to come in and just blow the doors off of them. Tennessee, just how they've been playing so far, and Oklahoma, who they've played, and it's been ugly at times. You'd think that spread would be really high, but it's Tennessee's laying 7. This USC-Michigan game, it's at 5.5 right now, and the thing is, it keeps moving up. It's 5.5. It'll go 6, 6.5, and then it'll get bought down. Same thing will happen again. So yesterday it was at 6.5. Announcement came out. Maybe that's moved it a little bit, but this afternoon it was down to 5.5. So, the announcement of the quarterback aside, maybe we'll get into that in a minute. What does it tell you when you see a situation like this where just on feel, you would think this is going to be, without looking at it, this is going to be an 11, 12-point spread, just kind of how things have gone for Michigan so far this year. USC's already beaten a decent team. What's going on here in your mind? What are we missing?
I think one of the things, and we flagged it in our top 10 video, and I flagged it a couple weeks ago, I think, to the ire of USC fans, but maybe it's a little more respected now. Probably not, but maybe a little bit. Geralt may not have any hope, but, sometimes I do. LSU's not a great team. They're just not. That week one matchup, there is a reality that when you play a team that's ranked number 13, and then it's proven out that they are not the 13th best team in the country, you did not beat the 13th best team in the country. And if you narrowly beat a team that is not the 13th best team in the country, you yourself may not be the 13th best team in the country. And I think that's a little bit here in my mind, is that we're hinging off two games, right? Because USC's only played two. The second one is Utah State. Now, Utah State had a close game with Utah. Don't ask me to figure that one out other than, I don't know, Mormons on Mormons, whatever it is. It just seems like BYU, Utah State, those games always go topsy-turvy. I don't think Utah State's a very good team, to say the least. And so you're really hinging a lot on against an LSU team that I think offensively is a lot more disjointed than people realize. And I think defensively is even worse than people thought they were. And so I think there are a lot of things, particularly offensively for USC, that we don't know as much as we think we do. Probably a lot of things around the offensive line, probably some issues regarding how well the quarterback can operate under pressure. And let's be real here. Michigan's defense is excellent. FEI, which shows a lot of priors, has Michigan 7th defensively. I haven't really seen much indication they've taken a huge step back. Week one, they had some glitches. Now, part of that is they didn't have Johnson playing the whole game. So I think there's some things here in terms of what USC is and who they've played where they just haven't been, they haven't been properly tested. And it's a lot of it is a side effect of the fact that LSU is half of a team right now, just like they were last year. But on the other hand, I do think USC's defense is really good. And you pointed to the point spread, Daniel. The thing I'll point to is the over-under, because I find that more fascinating. Currently sitting at 46.5. With a point spread of 6, that's saying it's a 26-20 game. And I don't think people think of USC as a 26-20 game. But to me, that points to the fact that I think both these defenses are good. I think Michigan's a little limited offensively, which helps USC. I think Michigan's defense is so good that USC's offense, as good as it's thought to be, is probably going to have a little bit of issues. I think that's where it's coming from. In a year where clock rules have really, really started to have an effect, taking away 1 or 2 possessions a game. And on the other hand, we're slowly talking about this. And again, we've talked about maybe putting out a video, probably not this week or next week. Again, frankly, I'm in sort of a massive amount of work travel these 2 weeks. Defenses have caught up stylistically. I think Minter at Michigan was one of the real guys that brought that NFL style of defense down. The same thing that's caused Patrick Mahomes to have issues with highly aggressive attacking defenses, lots of zone coverages, mixing your coverage. Not seeing a ton of split field in college, but you do see a little bit of that kind of concept. And it's causing issues for quarterbacks. We haven't seen Moss do that. We haven't seen USC against anything remotely like that, because I think LSU is a sieve. Nichols, again, at one point, third quarter, Nichols had a higher yard per attempt than USC did against LSU. I think this is a lower scoring game, is the answer, in my opinion, Daniel. And I do think USC is a better team than Michigan, in theory. I think the spread is what it is for a reason right now. But the reason it's not a runaway spread, the reason it's so different than what we feel like it should be, is because I think we feel like USC is going to be a high-scoring team. And I think that may be unrealistic with where we're at right now in college football, and also unrealistic given how good Michigan is defensively.
So there's a few things here that I want to touch on. One, the frustrating thing for me as someone who has USC in his top 10, to see that Utah is ranked above USC when they have a common opponent this early in the season. Utah had a 1-score game with Utah State in the 4th. USC beat them 48-0. I'm just do with that. It's not transitive property, but do with that what you will. Josh, I want to kind of give you a counterpoint and an opportunity to unpack something that just kind of struck me that I think touches on what you just said, and where I might disagree with Vegas a little bit because one thing does concern me a little bit about USC, and I think it's more because, you know, the LSU game in my mind was a little bit more because of new faces, especially at quarterback in this system. I think USC offensively long term is going to be very good. I don't think LSU defensively is good at all. I think they're a bad defensive team. They were terrible last year. They lost some of the better pieces from that team. Tried to backfill with transfers. They're a bad team. I think that if you score 27 points on them, it's not a great day. But again, week one, I think USC's offense is more competent than they showed in that game. Because if you remember in that game, it was a lot of you had to complete this crazy completion and this crazy completion to get some points. I want you to think through this concept and let me know if maybe it could cause some problems in this game. There's two types of ways to not score. One of them is you face a really good defense. Michigan has a really good defense. The other one is you have a very bad offense, particularly dysfunctional at quarterback. To me, the second one is way worse in terms of your outlook for what you're going to score in a game, because at some point, if your, let's say Michigan, offense is actually really bad and you actually are dysfunctional at quarterback, it's going to put a type of pressure on your defense that makes them not as good on the field as they are on paper. So talk about that a little bit, the difference between an offense that's just purely incompetent versus you're not scoring because you're facing a good defense.
It's interesting the way you put that. I'm not sure if I wholly agree. Honestly, it's in that one is necessarily better than the other, right? When you're playing a good defense, the advantage that a good defense has more than anything, or a great defense, is their ability to create negative plays, their ability to create opportunities for a team. That's something Michigan did for a few years. We argued that they did it to an unsustainable extent. They kept continuing to do it. I'll let you guys argue in the comments about the very obvious argument on why not that should have happened, but it was a thing we talked about for a long time before any sort of news broke about any given topic, that Michigan was almost had an unsustainable rate of big plays defensively, but that is also kind of the hallmark of an excellent defense. I mean, that was it the 2016 Alabama team that lost the national title? They had a defensive touchdown. It was like 8 games in a row until Eddie Jackson got injured late in the season is the point at which that stopped. So I think there are a lot of advantages, frankly, in being that defensive team. And there are a lot of disadvantages facing an elite defense because they can take away things, not only make it a low-scoring game, but also give opportunities for you to give points to the other team. But on the quarterback situation, I think, it all kind of qualifies on how bad the quarterback situation is and how limited it is. If you have an immobile bad quarterback is really, really bad, because it doesn't give you an advantage running, and throwing the ball, you can't do anything. If you have a bad mobile quarterback, especially a bad dual threat quarterback, you still have something of a puncher's chance offensively, because while you're going to be limited, and importantly, the defenses are going to be able to really stack the line of scrimmage and cause some real havoc for you, and their ability to, once it's not just, the ability to bump and run the receivers and help in the run game. The other problem is when the defense starts walking up, it's much easier to disguise your blitzes. And I think that's something people don't always understand. It lets you hide who's going to be the blitzer. You have more guys in the box to blitz. That really amps up the difficulty for the offensive line, because identifying a blitzer that's coming when he comes from linebacker depth, that gives you time to react. When he comes from the box and, 2 yards out from the line of scrimmage, by the time you realize this guy's coming, not the guy I thought, you may not have time to turn and catch him. And I know, I think, Daniel, where you're setting this up, because we've only done this for like 8 years, Michigan made a change at quarterback. And Warren, was the guy I talked about. I thought maybe it was a bit of an overreaction for him to get pulled. The second one was not his fault. I think he played quite poorly. I thought he made 2 really bad throws. I actually thought outside those 3 plays, and again, I really view it as 2 plays, the remaining parts of the game, he played pretty darn well. He made good reads. He got the ball out pretty quickly. He's actually a kind of a mobile guy. I got why they were starting him. I mean, he's not a terrible quarterback, I don't think, actually. But that statement is itself scary, Because if I came away saying he's not that bad, I'm also saying that a lot of what's going on in Michigan is everybody else. I really don't love that offensive line. I really don't love the receiving targets or explosiveness. But the one thing you have is you got two really good running backs, and you have some power in that O-line. And I haven't seen any indication that they trust Alex Orji to throw downfield. He was 2 of 4 in that game for 12 yards. They tried to have him throw in a couple series. They had that one drive where they ran, put him in, went down and scored. They had 21 points with Warren. One drive with Orji, they go up 28. But they threw, I think, one pass on that drive, and it was a bootleg thrown at or behind the line of scrimmage. Once they started throwing downfield, they went 4 and out, 3 and out every drive. Every drive with Orji. But I think running the zone read, being a run-first team, if they feel like they've got something there with USC, if they feel like this is a game that's going to be a 20-26 game, yeah, you can put up 20 points. You can run the old Nick Marshall offense where you run. Now I'm going to do RPO and just throw over the top. And I'm just going to do that occasionally, like a triple option, but throwing it about twice as much. And just keeping the defense honest, but also trying to get cheap points. And you can do that with the RPO. But I don't know. It's tough, Daniel. And I think the toughest spot for us trying to predict this game, and why, to me, it's a low confidence issue, I don't know what Orji is because I still haven't really seen him. And I'm kind of shocked they're going to make this change and have not gotten him more reps. But I definitely think it can't be viewed as a good thing that you had a guy that you clearly thought was the guy in Warren, and you panicked and made a bet and decided we made the wrong choice and switched that over at Arkansas State. Because if you really thought it was that close, that Orji really might be the guy, I think we would have seen him rotating in a lot earlier in these contests. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough situation, and obviously, again, like with the Tennessee game, it feels like Michigan's so far behind the 8 ball, so far behind, it doesn't make sense almost that the spread would only be 6 points. But I think that speaks to a level of competition played between the two teams. And I think it speaks to some of the edges in this game, particularly that Michigan probably has on the defensive side of the football. And that Michigan defense has been excellent, even in hard games. Again, Texas game aside, but I'm going to be blunt. I don't know that USC has the same pieces that Texas does. And is that a crazy statement to say that, if Texas put up 31 points, that USC is just a little bit worse, so they put up 26, and maybe their defense is a little worse than Texas, so Michigan scores 10. That starts to sound like kind of a reasonable proposition, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you think that the 31 was all that Texas could score, I think they could probably have scored more. One thing that I that keeps rolling around in my head is, so USC, and this is score time for me. I'm going to give my score, and I want you to kind of touch on this in your score. I've got 27-13 USC. I think Michigan's bad offense is going to contribute some to that 27 in a way that LSU's offense did not really contribute to USC's 27. Meaning USC scored 27 against a bad defense, and I'm saying they're going to say score 27 against what I think is a good defense. I think it's because Michigan's offense is going to contribute to that some. For all of the things that I don't like about LSU this year, I do like their skill players, and I do like their quarterback. I like their offense. I don't think they have great pieces on the offensive line, but they're going to score some points on people. Nussmeier's a good quarterback. He's not elite. He's a step down from Daniels, but he's a lot better than anything that Michigan's got right now in terms of comfort in the system and ability to make plays and ability to stress a defense. Nussmeier's that's a lot better offense, and they managed to scrape together 20 points. So I want you to kind of touch on that statement and give me your score.
As normal, Daniel's over there like loading the gun and like slipping it to me. It's a fair point, right? If LSU can only score 20 points, what makes you think Michigan can score more? And yet, Daniel, I think they will. My prediction in this one's going to be 24-21.
Who's 24?
I do think USC is the better team here. Again, like the Tennessee game, same deal where if I were picking, I'm more likely to pick the under than I am to pick either team. Granted, we don't really gamble Vegas always wins, guys. They're good at setting these lines. They're really good. And we'll do the model if you guys haven't followed us probably in a week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't want to make any hard promises for ourselves. We got to get our data provider squared up. Daniel, as some people know, was in the hospital for a couple weeks there at the start of the year, so we weren't able to get some of our stuff up and running. We're kind of all playing catch up with me now having been major work issues. But when we do our model, we often find that the spread's within about a half a point to a point of where our model tends to have the game. And, that says a lot. But, yeah, I mean, I think this is a low-scoring affair. I think LSU won, transitive property doesn't work for a reason. Every game is on its own. I think LSU could have scored more points in that game had they played differently. It was kind of a weird game. It was a short game. Neither team really clicked, and that's what made it so exciting. I also think LSU probably has some latent offensive line issues we saw in the South Carolina game, right? I just think Michigan can find a way to scrape together some points running the ball. They're going to have Orji in. They're going to be leaning on that ground game. They maybe get a defensive score somewhere. Maybe they only score 2 offensive touchdowns. But I also think when you have a low-scoring game like that, it's almost easier to get to like the 14-20 number. I mean, all the field position battle stuff gives you opportunities to put points in the field. And so, yeah, I've got it 24-21. And I do agree with you. I mean, if LSU could only score 20, why could Michigan score 21? I don't have a firm answer other than to say that for some reason I think they can. And I think they can make this a very close game. And I don't know if that's going to redeem Michigan in people's eyes. But we're quickly getting to the point, I will say, if you're a Michigan fan, you should admit this, all right? If Texas really is the number 1 team in the country, this starts becoming the same discussion we had about Georgia and Clemson, right? There's not anything particularly shameful about Georgia thumping you, or Alabama in their heyday thumping you, or Michigan when they were rocking and rolling just a couple years ago thumping you. Those teams thump people. And Texas may be that team this year. And losing 31-10 to Texas may not mean that you're any worse than the 3rd, 4th, or 5th best team in the country, because Texas, it may turn out, may just do that to everybody. Right. So, I do think it'll be interesting if this is as close a game as I suspect. Is the reaction going to be, and we know SEC fans, we get accused of being SEC homers, but we know SEC fans are going to say, oh, well, this was a close game, therefore USC sucks, whether they win or lose. Maybe it's just that Michigan's not as bad as people think. Michigan's actually maybe a pretty good team, especially if they get the quarterback situation figured out. And a lot of SEC fans probably should shut their mouths until they play Texas, because their team may get blown out a lot worse than Michigan did. It's funny to say that now SEC fans are Texas homers. Texas homers for a Texas team that has not played an SEC team this year. Keep that in mind. But they're SEC fan. They're definitely an SEC team now, because that's what's convenient. So yeah, 24-21. I think it's an interesting game. I think it'll be a close game, and it is at the end of the day, Daniel. I do think this is kind of a do or die situation for Michigan, because if they do drop this one by a significant margin, there are going to be a lot of questions asked very quickly about Sharon Moore in the future of this program for sure.
Yeah, and I think that you just can't have that much turnover and not take a step back. It happened to LSU in 2019. It's just hard. And then when you bring in a new coach, it's tough. I think that the expectations were unreasonably high for Michigan this year. I think that starting them out in the top 10 was unreasonable for them to hit. I think a close game in this one is something to build on. And look, they've got some winnable games after this. Minnesota, Washington, got Michigan State on the schedule. They'll win that game, Northwestern. So I think there's an opportunity to have a good season. It's just not going to be a top 10 season. But like I always say, fan bases the year after they win a national championship don't care. They got the hardware. Michigan got the hardware last year. It's house money. They really don't care what happens this year as long as they can see progress through to the end of the season. That's what you're looking for if you're a Michigan fan, because you can always look at that trophy that you just got, and it'll make some of these losses feel a little bit better. All right, let us know in the comments what you think this score is going to be. Tell us where we're wrong. Tell us where we're right. We'll mix it up with you in the comments as well. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week. Like and subscribe, and God bless.